guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Julia, and this is NB Library. And today I'm going to be wrapping up all the books that I read for the r/FemaleGazeSFF Winter and Fall Reading Challenge. I think I got the whole thing there. I made a video talking about my TBR for this back in the fall, and now that I've finished all the books and we're getting close to the time to turn in your bingo cards, I wanted to share all the books that I read and my ratings for them. I think here, maybe, or here? Let's say here. I'll have the A side card, and then here I'll have the B side. I should explain what this is real quick if you didn't see my first video. So the FemaleGazeSFF subreddit is for people to talk about speculative fiction, particularly by women or with a female gaze. And they had a reading challenge going from September 20th to March 20th. That's in, 3 days. I finished this a while ago, I'm not super worried about it. There are two sides, A side and B side, so if you didn't like the prompt from one card, you could substitute it for another one on the same slot. And then there is a women power mode, which I participated in, which is just that all the books you read should be by female authors. So for the A side card, the first one is nature theme, and I substituted on the B side card death theme and read Psychopomp and Circumstance by Eden Royce. This is a novella, and it is Eden Royce's long-form adult debut. She is a short story writer and middle grade fiction author. She's one of my favorite middle grade authors. I loved Conjure Island, The Creeping of Dogwood House, Root Magic was her first one, hoping that she comes out with more stuff soon. This was unfortunately a miss for me. I rated this 2.75 stars, and I just think it shouldn't have been a novella. It was very oddly paced. There's a lot of cool world building going on. We're in the antebellum South of the United States, and it is a kind of magical alternate history. The kind of central conflict of the book is that the main character's aunt has passed away, and she has accepted the responsibility of pomping for her. And in this world, if you say that you will, basically pomp is the executor and funeral planner for someone who's passed. If you don't do that duty, you will go to jail. It is a very important thing that someone has to take care of. And so she's young, she has a bad relationship with her mom, and there's this guy that her mom wants her to marry that she finds repulsive, so she agrees to go and pomp for her aunt. She regrets not talking to her aunt. Her aunt and her mom had a bad relationship as well, where her aunt was accused of stealing something, and they didn't really talk ever since then, but this young woman, despite not having talked to her aunt for a while, idolizes her. And so she goes to this town that is a sort of halfway point for people newly escaping slavery and the racist... I said antebellum earlier. I'm sorry, I mean post-Civil War Reconstruction South, not antebellum. That changes things. This town that is helping formerly enslaved people kind of adjust to living as freed people. So many people in this town idolized her aunt. The main character ends up having a bit of a relationship with this doctor, and the aunt's house is sort of haunted. But there's all of this build up to getting to the house and meeting people and covering these family secrets, and we never see the funeral. You could argue that the main character's arc is wrapped up before the funeral happens, but it didn't have to be like that. It could have culminated in the funeral, and it's just a shame that we never got to see it. So I have had so many other hits by Eden Royce, so I will be continuing to read from her, and I hope that she continues to write both adult and other ages. Next on the A side was bicolor cover, so hard to say, but I substituted for monochrome cover, and I read The Summer War by Naomi Novik, another novella. I love them. I've read a few Naomi Novik. I read Uprooted and Spinning Silver and the first 2 or 3 books of the Temeraire series, and I loved this. I would put this with The River Has Roots. It's not as good as The River Has Roots, which was one of my favorite books from last year, but it is, if you were seeking the vibe of The River Has Roots, you should check out The Summer War. I remember as I was listening to it on audio, I was out on my walk, and like 20 minutes into my walk, I sort of realized I was on my walk because I was so entranced by the story and I was like so visualizing it, like I was there, I was in it, and then I realized, sort of snapped back to reality, that I was in the real world still. It was a very transporting book. This is like a sort of modern day fairy tale. Says, I think, so much in so little time, but I'm glad that it was a novella. I didn't think that it needed to be any longer, but basically this is a world where a sort of like medieval Europe-esque country is very close to Summerland, which is like fairyland or elfland, and several years before the main character was born, her father helped fight back the Summerlings who kept coming to invade, and he sort of like negotiated a treaty and fought them back and this, that, and the other. And it turns out that she is a powerful sorceress. She has an older brother and a younger brother, and she idolizes her older brother. He kind of becomes estranged from the family and goes off to the Summerland to seek his fortune and be a knight, while her younger brother, I think he might be her half-brother, actually I can't quite remember at this point, was never really like valued or even like raised properly. He doesn't really like know how to function, and so she sort of like helps tutor him and raise him and make him her brother in a way that he wasn't before. And then she ends up betrothed to the Lord of the Summerlings, and all these other things happen, but it was so lovely. The language was beautiful, and I just highly recommend it, and that one was 4.25 stars for me. Next, finally getting to the A side, for folk horror, I read another novella, I just realized, What Stalks the Deep by T. Kingfisher. I read this right when it came out. I listened to it on audio, as I always do for the Sworn Soldier books, which are read by Avi Roque, who was Rain Whispers in the Owl House, one of my favorite animated shows. This is the third book in the Sworn Soldier series. The main character, Alex Easton, is non-binary, and this is taking place in like 1870s-ish, and Alex is called to America. Ka, that's Alex's pronouns are Ka and Khan. Ka is from this small country called Galatia in Europe, and Ka is asked by a friend to come and investigate this coal mine. The previous two books in this series, I could like acknowledge were creepy. They did not creep me out. This book creeped me the hell out, and I had a great time with it. I've said that I love T. Kingfisher's horror because I generally know that the characters are going to be okay, so I can weather creepy things happening because I know that it's going to be all right. I'm just gonna have like a spooky, unsettled time while I read it, and I was like yelling at my audiobook while I was listening to it. I was like yelling at Easton. I had to stop listening at night because I was getting creeped out. Just a great time, and I rated it 4.25 stars. Last book on this row for animal on the cover was King's Dragon by Kate Elliott. Now, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you'll know that I did a very long review of this book in my 20th Century Fantasy Books video, so I'll link that or something so that you can watch that. This is the first book in a 7-book series of like 600-page books. I had read a few other books for that video, like I read The Dragonbone Chair, and I read, oh, it was Daughter of the Empire by Raymond D. Feist and Janny Wirtz. So I was comparing this a lot to The Dragonbone Chair in my mind because I read it for the same video, and they came out like within a few years of each other. They're both extremely long, and this book is so good, and I can't wait to continue on with the rest of the series. And it juggles a huge cast of characters, dense, complex politics, and like multiple points of view and kind of like storylines going on. Kate Elliott is becoming one of like my favorite fantasy authors. I've read I think 3 books by her now. I am so impressed with the way that she handles huge casts. And this is kind of a alternate history Europe where it's very subtle, but in both society and religion, it's a matriarchy, and that changes things in very, I think, subtle and well done ways where history is still kind of like proceeding, but like women inherit property and there are very prominent women in their religion. I can't explain too much of this book because it takes place over the course of several months. There's so many characters, but I had no trouble keeping track of who was who. There's two main characters that are kind of on like wildly different storylines. One is this young woman who, her father dies and she gets sold into slavery and bought by this guy who sucks. And then her plotline proceeds from there. And then there's a young man who is supposed to go into like a monastic order, but because the monastery that he was supposed to go into got raided and burned, he joins a count's household. And so we're following these two characters kind of on opposite sides of this royal conflict, where there's this debate about whether this like king or his sister should be the ruler of the country. And so the two main characters are on opposite sides of that conflict in like cities across the continent from each other, and I don't think they even meet actually in this book, but they are in the same room at like 94% of the book. And I think they're going to meet later on in the series. But yeah, if you're looking for a book with lots of female characters, extremely complex, but still like likable characters, interesting politics, and just like well thought out world, I really recommend this book. I can't recommend the rest of the series because I haven't read it yet. Sorry if you can hear the dog. I loved King's Dragon, great start to the series, and I gave it 4.25 stars. Next row, we've got author's name begins with A. There's a K Jewelers that you hear like radio ads and stuff for that goes, every kiss begins with K. And so every time I saw this prompt, I would go, author's name begins with A. And for this prompt, I read Spellbound by Ali Theron. And this continues the streak of 4.25 star books. This is the first in a gay historical romance trilogy. There's actually two trilogies, and the second trilogy follows a second couple. And I just finished the 5th book, so I'm about to start the 6th book in this like series. So I really enjoyed this first book. I think this series has some problems, but I don't care. I just don't care. They're so much fun. The characters are just so lovely. There's this just like core cast of friends in the 1920s in New York and then kind of beyond, some of whom have magic, some of whom don't. This is a world where some people have magic. It's not widely known by the general public. The main character of this first trilogy, Rory, has magic, and then his love interest, Arthur, doesn't, but Arthur is aware of magic and kind of brings Rory into the magical world and into this friend group in this series. It kind of has a like nesting doll of villains problem in this series where like each villain is like bigger and badder and controlling the last, or connected to the person in the last book, but that's neither here nor there, honestly. Like, I think these books are just so fun and cute and lovely, and I just have such a great time reading them. This first book is pretty simple. It takes place over the course of like a weekend, and a nice thing that you can do with a romance trilogy is that you can have a completed arc for the characters in each book, but it's contributing to the larger arc that you would usually see condensed into one book of like a love confession and, you know, falling in love and deepening the intimacy of their relationship over the course of the trilogy in a way that I think is like really slow burn and well done and satisfying. In the sequel trilogy that I'm reading right now, one of the main characters is very prickly and it's taking him a long time to admit like love and feelings. But I'm not reviewing that series, I'm reviewing the first book in this series, which is Spellbound. So the main characters are not in love at the end of this like weekend or week and a half or however long this book takes place, but they are by the end of the trilogy, and they're have a beautiful, beautiful love. So I really love that. If you're looking for just like a fun, good time that reminds you of like reading fan fiction in your bed at 2 a.m., then this series is for you. Next, for Blood and Bone Magic, I read The Isle in the Silver Sea by Tasha Suri. I rated this one 4 stars, I think because I can see the flaws in it, and it wasn't quite a like transporting good time like the other 4.25 star books that I just mentioned, but I think about this book a lot. I was reading it at the same time that Florence and the Machine's latest album came out, and so I really associate the two of them because there are a lot of witchy themes in that album. Anyway, this is a sort of meta commentary on fairy tales and British colonialism. The two main characters are a knight and a witch who are both queer women of Southeast Asian descent living in England. This is in England where kind of multiple timelines are existing simultaneously because their world is controlled by stories, and if a story or like a fairy tale is cut off or doesn't like get to completion, then the part of the world or the part of England that it takes place in will disappear. And so like the British Isles are shrinking as a result of that. There's a lot of stuff going on and things get kind of wild, but I loved the atmosphere of this book. I love the relationship that builds up. It's kind of a Grumpy Sunshine. It's a Lady Night book. I've talked about it several times on this channel already, but I do recommend it. And I liked it more than Tasha Suri's previous books, which I have read, but this is definitely my favorite of hers. Sticking on the A side, next for murder mystery, I read Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite. I actually listened to this on audio, and I got the sequel, which just came out, as a advanced listener copy, so I've listened to Nobody's Baby as well. This is another novella. I think this is the last novella. Yeah, this is the last novella. I give this 4 stars, and I think I would have rated it higher if it just had, like, been long. Like, I would say, oh, I would rate it higher if it had been longer, but I can think of, like, 5-star short stories that are, like, in my heart forever, and other novellas that I've given 5 stars to. So I think, like, because it was short, but there was a lot of world building, it felt like it was kind of lacking, but it's around like 100 pages or thereabouts, and this is set on a spaceship and kind of unique in spaceships. It's not a multi-generational spaceship, it's not a cryosleep spaceship, it is a world, a spaceship, in which the same passengers who started on Earth 200 years ago are still on the ship. It's just that when you get old enough, or like if you die due to an accident or something, you get reborn into a 20-year-old body. And so people with memories of Earth are still like living and, you know, working and having their lives on this ship. And the like architecture of the ship and aesthetics of the ship are very Art Deco, and I really like that. So it feels a bit like, almost like steampunk or like Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow-esque. They have like cell phones or like personal devices that are called pocket watches. So just like a lovely Art Deco touch there. I think maybe one of the reasons that this book and the sequel novella don't quite get up there into the upper 4-star range for me is that with the like character development, world building, and mystery, it just feels a little bit like an overstuffed suitcase, and it's hard to have a mystery in so short of a time. I'm not a big mystery reader, so I've heard from other reviewers who are that this one was like predictable. I thought it was pretty clever. I won't spoil, obviously, but I'm generally not very good at telling where a book is gonna go, so I'm surprised every time. Next on this row, final on the row, is one of my lowest rated ones. This is We Unleash the Merciless Storm by Taylor K. Mejia. This is the second book in a duology. The first one is We Set the Dark on Fire. Now, I really liked We Set the Dark on Fire. It is a sapphic, kind of like dystopian story, and it's told from one of the love interest's point of view, and then I also have to be careful because I don't want to spoil the first book. We switched to the second love interest point of view, and a lot of secrets were being kept, and the first book I think is very unique both in its setup and in its main character. This is a world where it's very much like metaphorical, and like the geography is as much a metaphor as anything else going on in the world. Kind of like the whole world is this one island, and if you're from the outer island, you are like generally poor, and then there's a wall, I think, and then the inner island is more prosperous and privileged. People from like over the wall come through for a better life. What could this be a metaphor for? So in the first book, Donnie is from outside the wall, but she has gone to this academy for young women, and the powerful and privileged men in this world marry 2 wives that are kind of negotiated for them by their parents from this school. There's a prima, I think, and then a segunda, so the first and second wife. And the first wife, they have no intimate relationship with. It is their business partner who helps them with politics and stuff like that. And then the segunda bears the children and raises the children. And so they are expected to be this like binary of the primera, that's it. The primera is level-headed, unemotional, and the segunda is flighty and loving and pretty. Another metaphor for how, you know, women are expected to behave and all of that. And Donnie is unlike a lot of volatile and impulsive main characters in YA fiction, is a very measured, calculating, but internally very scared young woman. And then Carmen, her love interest in the first book, is the main character of the second book, and is just a YA protagonist. She's like, I'm a rebel, and I can fight, and I've got a tragic past, and all of these other things, and like, the first book felt so fresh and new to me, and then the second book just felt like so many other things that I've read or heard about, and so I was pretty disappointed by that. There was a plot thing that I did see coming in this book, and I think the fact that none of the other characters did makes them look incredibly stupid, and I gave this book 2.75 stars. Last row, we're gonna hop over to the B-side here, and instead of translated work, I read a book by a local author, and that was Tauhou by Kotuku Titiqua Natal, who is a writer of Coast Salish and Maori descent, and this is a very MFA program little book about what if Aotearoa and Vancouver Island existed side by side. And so the author is interrogating her Maori and Coast Salish ancestry. And there's all these little vignettes, and it seems like in each section we're kind of following a different character, but it was just kind of unclear and opaque to me. But I think that it says some really beautiful things about being Indigenous in a colonized world, whether that's, you know, in Aotearoa or Canada, being a queer woman of color, relationships with your family and your ancestors. I didn't quite get it, but I appreciate the craft, so I gave it 3 stars. On the A side, for the Vampire Square, I read The Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. I think I read this in January. This is the most recent book that I read for this. And I was complaining in my January review. I suppose complaining is, yeah, it was a complaint. If I'd known that this was a romance book going in, I wouldn't have had a problem with it. But it was just a problem of expectation versus reality, where I thought, oh, this is horror. This is historical horror with a romance. But in fact, the plot of the book is following the romance. It is a traditional romance plot beat. It is set in the past, so it's a historical romance, and then there are vampires there also. It's not horror to me. And I think the characters act pretty frustratingly. So the main male character's name is Nestor, and the main female character is Magdalena, but she goes by Nina. And so you know I read this recently because I can remember the main characters' names. So they were childhood friends who grew up on a ranch together. The ranch is owned by Magdalena's father, and Nestor is a young worker. But one night, Nena is attacked by a creature we know to be a vampire, and Nestor tries to bring her into the ranch house, but it seems like she's died. And so he runs away, never to return, for like 13 years. And this whole time he's out there being really angsty about how his best friend died. I think it's 9. Yeah, it's 9 years, but they're 13 when the book starts. And then, meanwhile, Magdalena survived and just went on to, grow up and be a regular young lady. And from her perspective, and her family kind of kept her in the dark, but from her perspective, Nestor just up and left her one day and hasn't written. And she's very mad at him. And meanwhile, Nestor is like, oh, my friend who died. And so when they reunite, Magdalena is pissed at him, and he's just like, I'm so happy you're alive. And so that goes on for a while with them, like, not really, like, speaking to each other and, like, sitting down and having a conversation because kind of Magdalena won't let him. I would have rated this higher if the, like, any plot other than the romance plot had been more prominent. When I say romance plot, I mean that, like, the arc of their relationship and their emotions is really, really prominent, where there is, like, a plot going on with the Mexican-American War is going on, and there are these, like, vampire attacks happening, and Anglos are trying to steal their land. And so, like, that's the overarching plot, but it's kind of fades to the background, and I would have liked to see that come up more along with the vampires and kind of more of the vampire lore. So, because of all of that, I rated this 3.5 stars. 3.5? That seems high. I might go back and change that, having had the time to think about it. The penultimate book on this row for the East Asian Author Square, for this I read Ocean's Godori by Elaine Yu Cho. Elaine Yu Cho is a author of Korean descent who used to work at a bookstore that I like in Seattle, so local author as well. This is, like, very much in the vein of Becky Chambers, specifically The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I can just kind of see the DNA of this book for sure. The kind of weird thing about this book is that this book has 3 POV characters. This is a duology, and one of the main characters, Tauhou, is more prominent in the second book, which is called Tauhou's Durumi. And there's also a romance going on between the other 2 main characters, Ocean, and the third main character isn't even on the back of the book. That's how little the author cares about him. Haven, yeah. He's also here, and he's supposed to be Ocean's love interest, and he has POV, but the plot of this book is about Tauhou, so Ocean and Haven feel completely sidelined in their own book, and, like, their, emotional and character arcs are there, but it's similar to kind of Vampires of El Norte problem. The overarching plot of the book that's, like, driving the action forward all has to do with Tauhou and his family. And I can see a lot of really good ideas and, like, world-building ideas in here, but unfortunately I didn't feel like the world-building contributed to the plot all that much. It was just kind of, like, set dressing, and I just wanted it to be better developed. And yeah, I wanted Ocean and Haven to be less sidelined. I think there were probably other reasons that this book didn't work, but it just kind of lacked the sauce for me. And the last book, which I also read maybe I read this in December, anyway, read this winter, is Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor, which I rated 3 stars. And I have a longer review of this book, and I won't go into it. I think a strength of this book, maybe and a weakness of this book, it's a complex book, and it inspires a lot of, like, complex thoughts. So if you don't already know, this book is pretty popular. This is about a Nigerian-American disabled author who is kind of at a dead end in her, like, life and career, and she just kind of sits down one day in a peak, and not having really read any sci-fi before or really have any involvement in the sci-fi fandom or community, writes the greatest sci-fi book ever written. My saltiness about this is coming out a little bit. From then on, I think that a problem of this book is that there are several plot lines about her family and her disability and her relationship with this guy that are contributing to the story, and we're also seeing excerpts from her book, Rusted Robots. The book is supposed to be about her as an author, but that is, like, one of 4 plot lines kind of going on, and then she also only ever writes one book, and kind of like George R.R. Martin, she's, like, supposed to be working on the next two because a trilogy was purchased, but she just like never writes it, and is also just like in the second half of the book, like years go by, she's not really concerned about or thinking about writing. This is actually, there was a debate on like Twitter or something, and I didn't actually see it myself, but I watched some videos and read some articles talking about it, where it's kind of this perennial issue of people who want to be writers that don't read books. And I will go a little bit deeper into that and talk about people who want to be genre writers but don't read genre fiction. And in my original review for this, I read aloud an Ursula Le Guin quote where she talks about how like people who are not familiar with the genre will kind of reinvent tropes that are very, very old hat and done to death, and they won't put any kind of spin on them. They'll just write them and go, here, a sci-fi novel, and you'll take it and go, yeah, I've read this before. And so I think that Zelu, the main character of this book, kind of does that with her novel, where like it's sort of a combination of like Murderbot and Wild Robot with like a few other things going on. And I also really wish that this book would have name-checked like N.K. Jemisin or Octavia Butler, and it never does. And it never talks about like kind of the legacy of Black female sci-fi writers. And I get that's not what the book is about, and maybe I wanted the book to be something that it's not, but I just got annoyed by that. And Zelu is a very complicated character, and I think it like makes sense to be both annoyed by her and sympathetic to her. I could go on for a lot longer, and I have before, so I'll end the review of that here and again say that, yeah, I gave this one 3 stars. So that concludes all the books that I read for this challenge. Thank you to the moderators of the subreddit for putting this challenge on. I'm excited to see if there's going to be a spring and summer challenge. I assume there is, so I'm looking forward to that being announced in a few days. I will probably, if I do make a TBR video for it, it'll be a ways down the line here. But I love reading challenges, I love making TBRs for them and executing them, and I love being pushed by the prompts to read something that I might not initially reach for. I read some great books for this. So thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. To the people watching this on Reddit, because I'm going to post it, thank you for watching. For the people watching this on my usual channel, I'll see you next week for my next video. That's gonna be it for me. Bye!